Hi everyone, and welcome to Sisters in Law, live in conversation on 8CCC 102.1 FM. You have tuned in for a very special episode today. This is our 2025 election special, and we are hosting our candidates debate, much in the tradition that we have been in keeping with for the last couple of elections. Before I begin, though, I would like to acknowledge that we're broadcasting from Mbantua, which is on Aranda country, and I'd like to acknowledge the privilege that we have to be able to live and work on this very beautiful country. I'd also like to pay our respects to elders past and present of the Aranda people, and to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners who are tuned in today. Now, if you are tuning into Sisters in Law for the first time today, welcome along. You've picked a great episode to join us for. Normally, this is a show about issues affecting women in Central Australia with very broad-reaching understanding of what those issues might be. We do tend to focus on the law and law reform, and obviously the people who have the most power for law reform are the people who are sitting in Parliament. And so in the lead up to this federal election, which is in its final day tomorrow, we thought that we would invite on all of the people who are putting their hands up to be the member for Lingiari in the Australian Parliament. So we have invited on every candidate for the electorate of Lingiari, and unfortunately we have not gotten all 6 candidates, so we have not received a response from Marion Scrymgour for the Australian Labor Party, and we also haven't received a response from Peter Flynn from the Australian Citizens Party. But we do have the presence of Chris Tomlins from the Indigenous-Aboriginal Party of Australia. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us. We've also got 𝘿𝙊𝙈𝙀𝙀 McFarland here from the Australian Greens. Hi, Blair.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we've got Lisa Siebert here from the Country Liberal Party, or the CLP.
Good morning, Sarah, to you and your listeners. Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for joining us. We are also joined on the phone by Sakellarios Bairamis, who is running for the seat of Lingiari on behalf of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. Hi, Sakellarios.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I know it can be a little bit tricky when you're not here in the studio with us, but we really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this debate. So, as a bit of an introduction first, I think our listeners would really benefit from having a bit of background to each of the candidates who are running today. So maybe if we'll start just over here with you, Lisa, if you could give us a bit of a background to your connection to the seat of Lingiari and what has inspired you to run for this seat in this election.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm born in Darwin, proud Territorian. I grew up in 𝘿𝙊𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙾 in West Arnhem Land, attended mission school, lived and worked there also. I spent some time in Jabiru, in the Kakadu National Park, also lived in Alice Springs for 3 years. So my background in work experience, I guess, is in the mining, tourism, hospitality and obviously law enforcement. And I know too well in growing up and living in community the challenges and the effects of domestic violence, any kind of violence in communities, within our community is devastating. And look, domestic violence it's like a cancer, right? It affects everyone. It affects all of us in the community. So I'm definitely passionate about representing all Territorians, but also to keeping our community safe.
Great, thank you for that introduction. Blair, over to you. What's your connection to the seat of Lingiari? What's inspired you to run for the Greens in this election?
Right, so I came up here like a lot of Territorians on holidays and just loved it and stuck around because it's just a fantastic opportunity after living in the cities in Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra. It was like just a breath of fresh air, literally, coming here. So I came up in '86 as a volunteer snake catcher for the Conservation Commission, and but I have a background in working with youth and got a degree in law. And so I when I decided to stick around, I thought, oh, well, maybe this is where I'll make a stand. And like I'd just been drifting around for, the rest of my life, just having fun. But I thought I'd better sort of pay my karmic dues. And so I plugged in, and I've been working in the sort of crime and justice and sort of substance abuse and all of those cold front type areas for the last 40 years. And and the reason I rang is because I've been working in those spaces for the 40 years. I've seen the chaos that sort of like comes from particularly the two-party system. Like it's sort of, I wrote a haiku about it, so it goes, how's it go? The two-party system swings from left to right and then back again like a wrecking ball. So over my time, I've seen good programs start and do really well, and then the wrecking ball comes and they're gone. And some other new program starts, and then there's a change of government and the wrecking ball comes and they're gone. I've seen really good programs come and go, and like a lot of people who've been around a long time, you see the waste of the way things are progressing now. And I think I've learned a lot from sort of dealing with the petrol sniffing problem, and what I learned is you have to change the environment. Changing individuals in the environment is very difficult work. It works about, in that petrol sniffing zone, 1 in 100 kids would go to rehab and come out and not be able to sniff when they return back to the community where it was sniffing. And all their friends and relations, it was all that was going on. So, and I realised how much power politics have in terms of changing the environment. It's the really major one, and that's how we got rid of petrol sniffing, was by sort of changing the environment. Yeah. And so I'm running for Lingiari, and I'm hoping that all the Gen Zs and millennials will vote for me.
Great, thanks Blair. Thanks for that introduction. And Chris, you're running for the Indigenous-Aboriginal Party of Australia. Can you tell me about your connection to the seat of Lingiari?
My seat, I was born here. I'm a local here. I was just born. I lived about 4 streets down the road here.
Yeah, wow.
And I grew up here as a kid, and in them days when we were growing up, like the east side was where all the half-caste kids lived, and the gap was all the three-quarter caste. And on the railway were the quarter caste, and all the full-bloods had to live out of town. It was like the apartheid.
Yeah, right.
It was sort of like exercise here taken over to South Africa. But a lot of things have happened in the past. We had truth-telling, we had treaty, we had a voice and all of that. And the treaty process, everything has failed, and the community is let down a lot. And I believe that self-determination, Indigenous self-determination, if we was to, we're looking for freedom. We want to be free in our country. We can't live in bondage forever. And I think self-determination is a way of engaging the community, because it's a community collective thing. It's not an individual thing. And it's engaging the communities to come together and heal together, walk together. We have a lot of issues that was inflicted on us, alcohol, violence, a lot of things. But if we had that responsibility ourselves, we can take care of this. And we're looking at mainstream Australians to support us into getting our country back, getting our kids back, and maintaining our culture.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's a good way for all of us to walk together instead of go on each side of it. Being divided is not a good thing in this country.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks. That's a really solid, I think, introduction to your party as well as to your background as well. Sakellarios, on the phone, you're running for Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Can you tell us a little bit about your connection to the seat of Lingiari and what's inspired you to run today?
Yeah, so I've been living in Northern Territory for 40 years, so I'm a Territorian. Now I started working with young people probably about 14, 15 years ago, crossed with youth justice and in between out-of-home care. So I've seen the impact of what alcohol abuse, drug abuse, domestic violence does, and how it affects the young people. So I've stuck around. I kind of like that kind of work because I get to interact with a lot of the young Aboriginal kids, and I really enjoy it because I've got close connections with Aboriginal people out at West Arnhem Land, and down in Tennant Creek and Catherine. So I've got some strong connections with Aboriginal elders and traditional owners, and I thought, well, there's a stigma behind the party, and I wanted to put that to rest because running for One Nation, I kind of want to bring that One Nation part of it together. Now, I strongly believe that I'm trying to work hard to give the elders and traditional owners their powers back so then they can be self-reliant, so they can, take care of their own communities and be self-sufficient. I think over-governing the communities isn't working. We can obviously see that with the youth crime that's happening. The elders, they can't control the youth because they don't have those powers anymore. They need to be given those powers back. Blair made a good statement before, saying something about wastage. I just want to touch on that. We're looking at $90 billion of wastage going to all these globalist agendas, and when that $90 million could be used for actually helping the Indigenous communities and also putting money back in Australians' pockets, because I think the cost of living is also creating more domestic violence because families aren't happy and they're struggling, and that creates tension in the home.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Sakellarios. I think what I'm taking away from all four of the candidates who have joined me today is I can get a real sense of passion, a real sense of understanding of all of the issues that affect the seat of Lingiari. Now, unfortunately, we've only got an hour on air today, so we can't, unfortunately, discuss all of those issues, but I do want to really narrow it in to women's safety, women's and children's safety within the seat of Lingiari. Obviously, I work for the Central Australian Women's Legal Service, so it's something that we're very passionate about at the organisation. And it's also an issue that affects the seat of Lingiari even more than a lot of the other seats and a lot of the other electorates in Australia. We know that we have the nation's highest rates of domestic and family violence and a massively inflated rate of hospitalisation as a result of domestic and family violence. So the severity of those incidents is much, much higher as well. So we'll start out keeping it very broad, and I'm interested in each of the candidates' answer to this question, but what are you aiming to do to address the safety of women and children in the seat of Lingiari? So maybe if we could start with Chris.
Well, like, the issue, safety is, that just can't, I can't get into that, but I'm just saying that there's just that understanding where in our cultural side, women's like use, universal use, create life, and the men are just prepared for that down the country. They provide for the children and all that, and that's sort of like gone out the doors there. And it's finding out where all of this problem actually come from, you know, to be able to deal with it. We can't just step in halfway through it and say, okay, you said this and that, but how did that happen? What happened here? How can we say, look, give us our country back, give us our children back, give us our culture back, and we'll give you all your drugs and alcohol back, you know? It's like an exchange like that. It's got to be community consultations, got to take place. That's something that has to take place in this country, where black and whites come together and start sitting down and talking about these issues that are really affecting our community. We don't like it, you don't like it, and no one likes it at that point. But we have to sit together, and this is what self-determination is going to lead. When we start sitting together as a community, start listening to each other and start acting on it, and then a lot of the problems we're facing today will disappear. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Sakellarios, you were mentioning something about what Chris has touched on there about self-determination. Did you want to expand on that in your response to the question?
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, I haven't actually had a chance to catch up with Chris, but I see his point exactly. And that's something that I'm advocating for strongly. I think the fact that there's over-governing on communities and there's too much micromanaging, especially with the councils and the government getting involved. That I remember when I was a young fellow, the communities, when I used to go out and visit out at Coburg and other communities, I remember the communities were very self-reliant, self-determined, and they will run a lot better. I find that during this time of the Labor government being in charge, and some of the CLP as well, there's been micromanaging. The powers have been taken away from the elders, so they can't input the Aboriginal law, not LAW, the LORE. They can't implement the way that they've been brought up, and I think that a lot of domestic violence stems from over-governing and overburden towards the families in the communities, especially the pressure that it's been putting on the men. And as much as we want to protect the women and domestic violence, we also got to understand, educate to the men and self-determination for the men in the communities puts a halt to that domestic violence. Not completely, but it does put a big roadblock in front of it, because the men have their pride back and they can do what they've been brought up to do, which is, provide for their family and be self-determined.
Thanks for that, Sakellarios. And Lisa, I might throw to you, because the CLP has been mentioned there in this sort of over-governance concept. Did you want to respond to that while also discussing your approach to women's safety?
Well, we're certainly on the same page there. Excuse me, Sarah. It's about focusing on prevention and early intervention. That's what I believe that we need to be doing, and all three tiers of government actually need to work together. It's a community-driven solution, and 100% agree with Chris and Sakellarios. Excuse me. If you'd remember, you go back to the mission days, and the traditional landowners were empowered. They ran their own community. They looked after their community. They all worked. They looked after their people. They had their own traditional custom laws, and they actually managed, how do I say that, their own people. So there was not a lot of violence or anything like that, if you would agree, Chris, in the communities, because they ran a type shit, because they had power in their community. Then we had the Labor government come in and turn the local councils into super shires. So this is where I see the problems. They have disempowered the traditional landowners. They've taken their voices away from them. They've taken their responsibilities away from looking after and dealing with their own people in their communities according to their traditions and customs laws. This is why we see what is happening in our communities. Not only that is domestic violence. There's so many scenarios. We have welfare dependency on the taxpayer. We have overcrowded housing. We have children that don't have a bed to sleep in, have a cooked meal to get ready to go to school. All of these things, can you imagine living in a crowded house with 17, 18 people and you have no room to move or breathe? There are no job opportunities in your own community. It connects. Right.
Yeah, and I do want us to have a bit more of a conversation about housing a little bit later on in the piece. But before we do, I might just let Blair respond to the question about just broadly what do you aim to be doing to address the safety of women and children in this electorate?
Like I said in my intro, it's pretty clear that you have to change the environment, and changing individuals without changing the environment it's a fruitless task. I think that communities maybe are overgoverned, but one thing they definitely are is under-resourced. 80% of people living in remote communities are on Centrelink, and Centrelink's below the poverty line. Outside of Alice Springs, for 1,500 kilometres in any direction, are the poorest communities in Australia. And poverty creates crime. It's again a no-brainer, like somebody said about 100 years ago. The law in its fairness prosecutes rich and poor alike for stealing bread and sleeping under bridges. Poverty creates crime, and the frustrations that Lisa talked about of people in communities living those lives when it's overcrowded and they're hungry and they've got nothing. It creates crime in two ways. One, it creates hungry kids breaking in to steal food. That's one level. But on another level, it creates crime because crime is a social, our social contract says, well, we'll play by the rules and we'll benefit from the rules. But if you're growing up not benefiting from the rules but rather being persecuted by them, and if you're looking forward to a life of chronic illness, imprisonment and early death, then you haven't got a lot of investment in the set of rules that are being played. It's like the end of a Monopoly game. I don't know if you've ever played Monopoly, but unless you're the winner at the end, you're just going around losing all your money, landing at other people's hotels, having nowhere of your own and ending up in jail. And at the very end of some Monopoly games, the board just gets thrown in the air because people don't like being systematically crushed. And that's what's happening here. Capitalism is a big Monopoly game, and so the way to affect it is to change. And the really most practical thing that can happen overnight is you could double the dole. If you double the amount of money that Centrelink was giving out to people, then people would be lifted above the poverty line. And when that happened during COVID, crime went right down. There are other factors for sure, but like the money story is a absolutely basic one, and that's where the Greens would intervene.
So increasing the dole is one of your sort of core...
All Centrelink payments, and
Yeah, one of those policies that you see would address the safety of women. Is that a policy that is shared amongst the candidates here? Lisa, is that something that the CLP is putting forward at this election, or that, the coalition more broadly, I suppose?
As in increasing the dole? I don't believe so, Sarah. Look, what I think we should be doing is, rather than increasing the dole, we need to actually encourage the jobs. We need to encourage for people in the community to come out and provide that opportunity. We need to bring people along in our communities, along for the ride and the journey, to contribute to our society and be part of our community. And, there's not a lot of infrastructure. There's no amenities for the youth. There's really not a lot out there for them to do. And this is why also we see the rise in crime, because they've got absolutely nothing to do, nowhere to go. There's no social cohesiveness with our youth. So this is something that, like I say, this is a community-driven solution. And we need to get together to come up with these solutions, common sense approaches, and say, what do we need in our community for all Territorians? What do we actually need? And until we actually address the grassroots issues and determine and analyse, even a risk assessment, and say, do we need this? What do we need? And communities, towns, regional, rural, vary. So we need to start looking and talking to people on the ground and actually asking them, what is it that you need? What are your issues? And go from there.
Yeah, so a very different approach to tackling poverty versus what Blair was saying. And Sakellarios, I think I heard you indicating that you wanted to weigh in on that point as well. Did you have something to contribute?
Yes, definitely. 100%. Lisa's correct. The doubling the dole does nothing. We're talking about getting the alcohol and all the bad things away from the communities, but also giving them self-determination. Self-determination isn't giving them the dole or extra dole. It's giving them opportunities for infrastructure, opportunities for small businesses to build in communities. The iron boomerang that we spoke about while I was in Alice Springs is providing the resources, the internet, the power, the water running through Central Australia, which is going to help massively for those small outer towns and for the communities. It's going to give them the resources they need. And not just that, it's going to provide jobs for them, provide jobs for men in communities, which then makes them feel good, gives a positive feel of looking after their family, taking care of their communities, being men of the community. And that slows down domestic violence, because right now they're not empowered. They don't have that power. They feel as if, and like I said, over-governing is doubling down on the dole. Making them dependent on the government does not help them. It creates more dramas. It puts more money in their pocket. It makes them feel like they're not empowered, like they're not doing anything for their families. It creates alcoholism and drug use. What we need to do is exactly what Lisa said: get together. All three branches of government need to get together, work together, look for ways where we could put infrastructure and jobs and, enterprises through communities. We're the one important factor that we're missing is the Aboriginal people are so smart and so technically gifted that if we can give them those opportunities to thrive, they will thrive. They have thrived for thousands of years. So the more that we push money into the pockets while they're not doing anything, it does not help them. It takes them backwards.
Thanks for
that.
So
that's my point of it. I think we all need to work together, and we need to create an opportunity for them to be able to be self-determined, self-reliant, and that way their power goes back into their hands, and then they're protecting their families, protecting their communities, and domestic violence slows down that way.
Thanks very much, Sakellarios. And I think that response was touching quite a lot on, Chris, the basis of your campaign here. Did you want to weigh in?
Well, it's sorting out where this, had this all happened, it happened with the Labor government, with their intervention. They shut down over 140 communities, never facilitated for these Mbantua communities. They said, come into Alice Springs. I'm an Islander man, my mother's Wildbury. But I grew up here, and there's warramunga. There's a lot of different mob here in this country. It's never been like this before. The government created this. And the reason they create overcrowding and all that is so they can point the finger and say, look, there's child abuse going on there, or there's drug smuggling going on, or, they can pick what they want, and people will believe it because they created this mess. People got homes, they got their country to go back to. We want all these mobs to piss off back to their own country. We're sick of it. We are the people. We want to live in our country peacefully and freely. We don't go out onto their country and disrespect that. We are respectful people, and we want to get back to being that. And I would like it if the Liberal or the Labor government can say, OK, let's get all these mob back on their country, let's facilitate for it, and that'll just take out a lot of numbness in this town just by fixing up what you've created. Don't just make something up and just come this great forgetting that Australians suffer from, this great forgetting. It's got to be done. We've got to work together. Don't let this government just bulldog you all the time. I would ask in the communities and the people to stand up and let's fix this up. We can do it. It's only fixing up what the government created, that's all.
Now, I think one of the sort of the through points that all four of you have made so far is that one of the drivers that we see of domestic violence is poverty, is this under-resourcing or lack of access to resources. In particular, the services that are addressing domestic and family violence in Lingiari, including calls, but also including all kinds of other services, such as the Tarangire Council, such as the Women's Safety Services of Central Australia, such as car flu, all kinds of different services around Central Australia and the Barkly region. All of us are seeing that one of the major barriers to women who are trying to escape domestic and family violence is a lack of housing. And Lisa, you touched in this earlier when you were talking about overcrowding as well in a lot of communities, as well as within urban centres within the seat of Lingiari. To what extent do each of our candidates think that the government is responsible for providing additional housing, and to what extent will that, in your minds, address the issue of safety for women and children in our community? And Blair, I think we haven't started with you yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see that it's crucial, and I can see that as a sort of stopgap measure, it's really important, but it in no way addresses the drivers of domestic violence, creating somewhere where people can run away from it too. But I understand the value of it. But you have to think past those immediate needs, like for sure, resource that. It's like a sort of tourniquet on a wound that's going to kill somebody if you don't do something about it. But in the longer term, you have to address the poverty. Like for sure, the dole is just another one like that. Like the reason I talk about it is because you could do it tomorrow. Tomorrow you could lift millions of people out of poverty with the stroke of a pen, the way it happened in COVID. Then you've got the basis to start developing jobs and developing that sort of putting resources into communities to draw people back to communities, to draw people back from Alice Springs to the communities. There's nothing to draw them back to now. Like it's a place where you can't afford to keep the power on. It's a place where you can't afford to shop in the only shop because your Centrelink money is not enough. So creating that change in the community is part of changing the environment. So for sure, fund those things, but see them as for what they are, which is an interim measure to give us some time to address the real drivers of domestic violence.
And Chris, would you agree with that in the sort of the housing space? What extent do you think housing has to play, and what role do you think that the government has to play in contributing additional housing to the seat of Lingiari?
Yeah, I believe that because of the situation we're in right now, that is essential for because women need a place to and a space for their kids, and in this state we don't have it. But like the Greens were saying, that like I said earlier, people, this is overcrowded here in Alice Springs. We need to readdress what happened. We need to get the people. There are structures still out there in place that just needs to be refurbished, rebuilt, and it's getting the kids and the families back out onto their country. and they will be self-motivated into fixing up their homes, that stuff. And it's a two-way, like I said. We've done a bonnet series where we asked retired electricians and plumbers to come out onto country and teach our kids their skills, and in return we taught them about stories about our country and our culture and what it means. So that's what I'm looking at. We can fix anything up if we get together. Mm-hmm. And as a community, and I believe that's possible, that we can come together and we can sort all this problem out. You know, it was created from the Labor government. I'm not going to go Labor Liberal, but you know, they're two different spoons, but they stir the same shit. But just people. It's got to be community driven from now on, and the government has got to listen to the community. Put the community first, because we have the issues, we have the problem, and together we can sort it out.
Mm. Thanks, Chris. Lisa, what would you say about the issue of housing and what role the government has to play in providing more housing?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I think, what we also need to do is we keep talking about community-driven. We also need to support community organisations to deliver domestic violence awareness training. And if I can say, women, men, children are all victims of domestic violence. Now, the housing, going back to the housing in the communities themselves, the overcrowding, people on the ground in the communities I've been visiting the last 6-7 months have said it's all repair and maintenance on their housing. They have not had any new houses built in their communities for years, decades. All these houses are going to people who are not from their community. They come in, the houses are provided to others because they need them for their jobs. So let's be real when we talk about housing in communities, and this is why they can't stay in their communities. We go back to the overcrowding. There's no new houses for them. Therefore, people are coming in and taking jobs within their communities are providing the housing. Let's be clear about that. A lot of people in the communities are telling me this. And any blind Freddy can see that when they visit these communities. It happens, and it's the reality of it all. So the coalition government is committed to reducing migration by 25%, 500,000 new homes. Now, this is what I'll be fighting for the fair share for our electorate of Lingiari, to ensure there are new houses built in our communities for our people that actually live in that community. That way they have their housing, the men, women, children have their own house in the community. They don't need to leave to be anywhere else. And the other thing, you speak to the community members, they don't want to leave their community, but they have no choice because they don't have the housing, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the services, the health, the education, whatever that may be. This is why you have people coming to Alice Springs. This is from everywhere else, just like Chris mentioned. We need to have the services and the delivery in our own communities so that they can stay there.
So to really put a very fine point on it, will the coalition government, if elected, commit to providing additional housing, as in building new structures, new houses in remote communities?
They have committed the $500,000, Sarah, right across Australia. For myself, if elected, that is what I'll be fighting for in Canberra, for a piece of the pie for the electorate. And that's what I'll be fighting for. The $500,000 is right across Australia. I'll be fighting for that, to make sure that we have the housing we need on an as-needs basis for Territorians in the Lingiari electorate.
All right. Thanks very much, Lisa. Now, Sakellarios, I am conscious that I need to remember to include you in these positions. Now, Sakellarios, can you tell me a little bit about One Nation's position on housing and on the importance of housing in remote communities, in particular in the seat of Lingiari?
Yeah, Chris and Lisa both touched on it regarding overpopulation. Now, I'll touch on the immigration thing. We have a immigration policy of negative net zero, which means more people going out than coming in until we can fix the housing crisis. We're just bringing too many people in at the moment. Our country's in disarray. And I mean, we're talking about the cities in disarray. I can't imagine how bad the communities can be. I've only been to a few of them, but, you know, there's even more remote communities than what I've been to. You know, the communities that I've been to, I've only been 4 or 5 hours out of town. So we're talking communities sometimes 10 hours away. It's community struggling, and we've nowhere to for these women and children when they go through these issues, because we're struggling with housing problem, and the housing problem stems from immigration. I mean, you can't get any more out of touch with reality than what Labor and the Greens are doing. They're bringing in so much people and forgetting about the people that are actually here. Like, the Australians are struggling. Like,
Right.
This country is overpopulated, and we can also so the housing crisis, and also what Chris was touching on about plumbers and electricians. That's what I was saying before. It's like you get them out, you get the plumbers and electricians out there, you get them teaching these skills, and then they become self-reliant. And the problem is, over-governing again interferes. Just let them be. They're more than capable enough to looking after their own communities. If we just give them the resources to do it, rather than saying here's more money, because giving them more money does nothing, and bringing thousands and thousands of people into this country does nothing for the communities, and does nothing for domestic violence, does nothing for Australia as a whole. It's so out of touch. It's just creates more division, more heartache, and more stress and fractures families and stuff like that. I think that One Nation's policy on immigration stems with housing as well. We need to take care of the people that are here, because this country is in all sorts of mess. Let's fix this country. Let's fix the people that are here, and then we can worry about bringing in people.
Right. And to frame the question in the same way that I did to Lisa, to really bring it back to housing, would One Nation be pushing for, or would you, on behalf of One Nation, if elected, would you be pushing for additional housing properties to be built in remote communities in the seat of Lingiari?
Yes, definitely. We will be cutting back on the government waste. So we've pledged to fight back on the government waste, which is roughly estimated at $90 billion a year. And a chunk of that will be put into infrastructure and access, and also resources to communities, which includes housing. This is what I'm touching on before. Is we're worrying about saving the world, and our country is in absolute all sorts of mess. We need to worry about fixing this country. Stop sending money overseas that isn't helping the people in our communities. Use that money to build houses, to feed people. Let's bring this country back to where it should be. And then we can worry about helping other countries.
Thanks for that, Sakellarios. Now, I want to turn us back to I suppose, a more sort of high-level understanding of domestic and family violence. And I'm going to use the resources that have been produced by Tangentyere Council, who are doing some amazing work in Central Australia in this space. Now, they've very helpfully summarised the drivers of domestic violence against First Nations women as being gender inequality, combined with the effects of colonisation on Indigenous people and the effects of colonisation on non-Indigenous people. So those are the three core drivers that the evidence base has identified as the main underlying factors that contribute to violence against First Nations women, which, as we know, is the majority of women experiencing domestic and family violence in this electorate. So, Sakellarios, if we could start with you, what would you, if elected, be doing to address those three drivers?
Sorry, cut out with it. You were saying the third one. You cut out on the third one.
Oh, I beg your pardon. So the three drivers that have been identified are gender inequality, the effects of colonisation on Indigenous people, and the effects of colonisation on non-Indigenous people.
Well, I think we need, at the end of the day, we need to just stop playing the games of division and just work out that we're all actually Australian and we all love this country. Aboriginal people were here way before us and were the first people here, First Nations people. We need to respect their values and their rights. Let them be self-reliant, self-sufficient, stop over-governing them. And then, at the same time, as exactly what Chris said, take our shit out of the communities and go back to our area. It's at the end of the day, we could all work together as one people, and that's exactly what One Nation stands for. So there's no, gender inequality, all of this stuff. It's just division. If everyone just works together and and looks at each other as all Australians, then none of this stuff even gets mentioned, and none of it even it's not even an issue afterwards. The problem is it gets mentioned and it gets pushed down our throats that it becomes an issue, and then people get divided. And that's exactly what's happening with the voice. You know, Aboriginal people, elders, traditional owners, they've got their own voice. They don't need someone in Canberra to give them a voice. They've got their own voice. I know plenty of traditional owners that have turned around and said to me, there's a load of garbage. Who are these people in Canberra trying to turn around and say that they need a voice? They got their own voice. They don't need someone to speak for them. It creates division. We need to just stop pushing all this division stuff down people's throats and just work together as Australia.
Now, Chris, I might turn to you here, particularly with the platform of self-determination that you're running with. How would you respond to those three drivers that Tarrangina Council have identified?
Well, it sticks out. Two of them was colonisation, and how we deal with it. You know, it has put us in in this issue we are today. And I think what First Nations saying is the community working together, you know, and exercising those community values and powers, and because at the end of the day, it's the community that puts the government in power, and so the power's got to go back to the people, more or less. You know, this is our government. And the government's got to respect us. It can't just say, oh, well, we are corporate government now, so we've got to listen to the corporates. You know, they've got to listen. The government has to listen to the community and listen to the people, and the government has to put community values as one on their priorities. And from there, we can solve and work through a lot of issues a lot of the stuff we face today. If we got together, it'll disappear, I guarantee you that. Just coming together. We are all beautiful people in this country, and we deserve to explore that a lot more deeper than what the government's preventing it from happening. We just got to get together, and we can do it.
Thanks, Chris. And Lisa, I saw you nodding along there. Did you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, look, agreed on both. It is exactly right. We don't need the divisiveness in our country. We are Territorians here, we're all Australians. We all bleed the same blood. I'm just can't believe why we have such a division in our society. Again, it's about community. Chris said we're all beautiful people. We are. We should not be targeted by our skin colour or our backgrounds or our heritage. We are all here. What happened in history is history, and that's where it needs to stay. We all need to work together as a community, as one people, and to get what we need to better our communities. That's what we need to do. I'm so sick of the divisiveness. It doesn't matter if you're transgender. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, whatever your background. We are all here. We have the most beautifulest country in the world, I believe. The Territory is a beautiful place. This is our home. We are the gateway to Asia. We have the best place in Australia, and we need to look after it. And we can only do that together without any divisiveness, because it's going to kill us.
Thanks, Lisa. Now, Blair, the same question again. So the three drivers, as a reminder, that have been identified by Tarrangina Council, the three drivers of violence against First Nations women are gender inequality, the effects of colonisation on Indigenous people, and the effects of colonisation on non-Indigenous people. Do the Greens, or do you as a representative of the Greens, have a position that you would be pushing in Parliament, if elected, on either of those, on any of those three drivers?
So, just before I launch into that, I'd just like to sort of look at those three things and sort of think about that first one, gender inequality. Well, that's another colonial sort of idea, isn't it? And I'm sure Chris remembers when Indigenous women had a lot of power in their own culture and their own societies, and they had that the power was reinforced by ceremony, was reinforced by lots of cultural norms. There were 𝘿𝙊𝙈𝙀𝙀𝙀, which is the Warlpiri word for it, which is like places where only women could go, and so that was like their own sort of form of safe house, really. And the people would go and live there, and men weren't allowed there, and there was a lot of respect and a lot of power in those Aboriginal women who were ignored by the anthropologists. When the anthropologists came through and started writing down stuff, they didn't talk to the women because they were men, and they carried that colonial sort of sexism with them, and it influenced the way they saw the whole of everything that was unfolding in front of them. So I think those three things are all one thing, really, because like that gender inequality is not something that existed to the degree that it exists in Western society in the Indigenous domain. And Chris might sort of like have some opinions about this, but so they're all part of the same thing. They're all part of the colonial history and our colonial legacy. And it'd be really nice if we could all get together and do that sort of stuff. But I just don't see any sort of sign that that's really happening. And I've heard that same stuff. People very idealistically and with good hearts say that, and they've been saying that for the 40 years I've been here listening to it. And it never comes to anything, because you get people together on the ground and they have all these great ideas, but then they never go anywhere, because the breaking ball comes and the new government comes, or it goes against the interests of some of the corporations that are actually running the country through to big parties, and they just never happen. So, and like there isn't really inequality. There isn't equality in Australia. There's the haves and the have-nots, and the haves are getting more and the have-nots are getting less. The middle class is practically gone, from the 50s and 60s, when it was a powerful force in Australia and around the world, post-World War II. There was a whole lot of people who came back from the wars with an idea that, hey, what were we fighting for? And they brought in all sorts of institutions that made it fairer and made it so you could be a normal worker with a normal job and own your own home, and your partner could stay home and grow up the kids, and those kids could get an education and have a better life than you. That, for about 25 years, that was possible. But then the monopoly game that I talked about before kicked in, and the people that own the hotels put up more hotels and started buying up all the land, and we ended up losing it all. So inequality is there, and that's why we have governments, because if you don't acknowledge that inequality and try and do something systematic about it, then the inequality sort of just continues, and it talks nice way, but nothing ever changes. And this is what the Greens have been saying, like, don't vote for the major parties and think anything's going to change. It's not.
Thanks very much, Blair. Now, I'm conscious that we are running a little bit low on time at this end, so I might just open it up to the candidates for any sort of closing remarks that the four of you might have on the topic of women's safety, on the topic of domestic and family violence within the seat of Lingiari, and any promises, anything that you would like our listeners to know before they cast their ballots, maybe today, but at least by tomorrow. So, Lisa, if we could start with you.
Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, it's about prevention and early intervention, and it's about domestic violence awareness. Again, it affects all of us. It's women, men, children. The whole community is affected by it. Now, the housing crisis, as we touched on before, all of these things are connected. We need to work together as a community, all three tiers of government, and let's not forget that Labor has held the seat of Lingiari for 24 years. Now, if someone can please tell me what changes they have made in the 24 years of government, I'd really like to know. But moving on, whoever is in government needs the community-driven solutions, and that is speaking to people on the ground and finding out what the issues that matter most, talking to women. All these services that are provided, what is actually delivered? We need to strengthen those services. If we're providing federal government, we need to know where the money's going, what the purpose of the funding is, are the services being delivered? Whether it's the safe houses, whether you're building more houses in the communities, whether you're having awareness training for men, for women. I mean, you think about ourselves as a normal family. You would have marriage counselling. You would have the support services to come to speak to you as a couple and say, what are the issues here? I don't think they have that opportunity provided to them. We can put women into safe houses, we can put them into other houses, but do we actually sit and speak to them about what the actual underlying issues are? Because for me, especially the policing background, it's a revolving door and it has to stop. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's about practical solutions, speaking to people, helping them. You can throw as much money as you want. It's not going to solve the problem. It's about talking to women, community-driven, all working together to tackle this, because we can't do it otherwise.
Thanks, Lisa. Sakellarios, did you have any final remarks that you wanted to make on the topic of domestic and family violence and women's safety?
Yeah, definitely. At the end of the day, we need to give the power back to the communities. Look, I remember Jacinta Price touched on it, that the councils need to be looked into a lot harder. The fact that the sexual abuse for women and children in communities isn't being looked at hard enough and looked into hard enough, and then other members of the CLP weren't on board with Jacinta's ideas. I kind of have the feel that the fact that Lisa isn't a career politician, I feel that Lisa's probably more in a better position running in the CLP, and I can feel that grassroots coming out of her where she actually gives a crap, not like the other members that are just running for Parliament. And as Lisa said, Labor's been in government for 20-odd years, for Lingiari, and the only place that's gone is downhill. Nothing has changed. Nothing has actually even gotten better. The things are just getting worse and worse. And that's the fact that because there's no representation for the communities in Lingiari. Without representation, we can't fix these issues. Domestic violence is a huge issue in the Northern Territory and in Lingiari. And without that representation, how can it get better? We've got Labor MPs that are sitting on their hands in Parliament once they're elected and just taking a paycheck. We need someone on the ground working hard and trying to make things better and working with the communities, not sitting there making the decisions for them. Ask them, what do you need to make this better? Talk with the communities, talk with the elders, let them feel empowered of the decisions that they're going to make, so then that we can make these things better. The money that is given by the federal government for these communities to help the communities with these issues is not making its way to the communities. It's going to the councils, and the councils are going with a bucket of oranges to the communities. They need to be audited. They need to be scrutinised. They need to be pushed, to do their job. They're meant to be looking out for the communities, and they're not. And Jacinta Price touched on it very heavily, and I 100% back it. And I hope Lisa's on that line too, because our Chief Minister didn't back it. Leah Whanakanaro did not back Jacinta Price's thing to push and audit the councils. And I hope Lisa does, because
100%.
It really needs to be done.
All right. Thanks very much, Sakellarios. Chris, if I could turn to you for your closing remarks on the topic.
Well, my closing remark is that finance is the biggest thing that's dealing with there. And I just want Territorians to know that over 900,000 million tonnes of earth gets shipped out of the Northern Territory every year. We receive royalties $200 million. It goes to ABA, which is controlled by the federal government and the land council. So good on Jacinta, go and kick their ass. Because if we had to sit at the table, black and whites come together, and we've got $200,000 million there, to sit and say, okay, let's sort this problem out. We can do it. Just give us, we want to self-determine our royalty money. That's coming out of our country. $200 million a year. 900,000 million tonnes of earth getting shipped out of the territory. That's a lot. Now, $200 million can take a lot of weight off Territorians. And when I get in, I'm going to make sure we get that money, because it's just not $200 million a year. We've got over $1.4 billion sitting in Land Council and ABA. And they're splundering it around. ITEC, these new buildings and everything, that's not benefiting Aboriginal people, let alone the bloody community. So we've got to start self-determine how we're going to spend our money, and we can do it together. I reckon if we all sat together, we can get a lot more value out of that $200 million a year than what the federal government is leaking to us as funding, federal funding. It's not federal funding, it's our money they're giving us. We want to be able to self-determine how we spend it, all Territorians together, and we can do it.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And Blair, over to you for your closing remarks on women's safety and domestic and family violence.
It's been good sitting down with people here and hearing where people are coming from and their ideas. And Yes, and as I say, I've heard a lot of them a lot of times before, and I appreciate that people are trying to reach out for solutions, but most of the solutions that people are reaching out for seem more like unachievable motherhood statements than actual practical policies that you can actually implement to affect the safety of women on the ground. And I think it does come back a lot to poverty and lack of resources in those communities, and the absolute failure that all Australian governments have manifested in the way we've engaged with Aboriginal people. There was a strong, self-reliant race of people who lived here for hundreds of thousands of years, or long time, with no problem. And now that they've been sort of colonised, and now they've been administered by public servants for a few generations, we have a population that's sick and demoralised and tearing itself apart. It's an absolute indictment on what's happened in that setting, and it's been caused by government. Since earliest days, there was people on the frontier who were a law unto themselves, and there were the massacres and that sort of stuff. But for all of my lifetime, it hasn't been like that, but we've seen the whole situation get worse and worse and worse, and the poverty is there's the major driver. It's affecting everybody in Australia. But the people who are in remote communities are the poorest of the poor, and you really can't. Like somebody said, it's easier to tell people to stand on their own 2 feet once you take your boot off their throat, and until we do that, there's not going to be much progress. And that's what we want to do. We want to make the whole situation fairer for Aboriginal people and for people generally across Australia.
Great. Thanks very much, Blair. And thank you to all 4 of our candidates who have joined us here today. To remind our listeners of who those people were, we've got Lisa Siebert here from the CLP. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You have a good day, and to you and your listeners.
Thank you, and to you as well. Blair McFarland from the Greens Party.
Yep, vote Green.
Chris Tomlins from the Indigenous-Aboriginal Party of Australia.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much. And on the phone line, we've got Sakellarios Bairamis from Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. Thanks, Sakellarios.
Thank you for having me. God bless you guys. Good luck.
Thanks very much. And thank you also to everyone who has tuned in to listen today. My name was Sarah Edwards. We have been coming to you live from the 8CCC studios in Eastside, Mbantua-Alice Springs, with our very special Election 2025 episode. I really hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode, and if you are a woman or a non-binary person in Central Australia or the Barkly region and you'd like to speak to a lawyer, please do get in touch with us at Calls. We do have our head office in Alice Springs and Mbantua, which you can contact on 89524055, or you can just walk into our office, which is right next door to Kmart. We also have a Barkly office, which is up in Tennant Creek. You can call it on the same number, 89524055. And you can also walk into that office, which is at 85 Patterson Street, right next door to Centrelink. Thanks again so much for listening. We wish you all a very safe and happy week ahead. You can tune back into 8CCC 102.1 FM next Friday at 9:30am, when we'll be returning to our usual half-hour format for more Sisters-in-Law live in conversation.